a percentage of profit on what we lend to you, and that percentage of profit is going to be assigned to, you know, to blocks and blocks of people, thousands and thousands of people. But how to distribute that?
They find a way.
Is another another question
Another
too.
function, and it's not in the United States.
Yeah. No.
China, India will be. Forget about that.
Well, you know what? They might just compute it out to.
Now China was having a lot of internal problems. Who made China? The Chinese Borges. Internal problems. Labor poverty.
Oh yeah. Oh
India
yeah.
also.
Yeah.
You go to
A lot of greed in India and China. A lot of greed.
All high-rise apartments. Look at how
People are in the streets.
Well, yeah, but I put it in the slums. I think about lending scarcity. I think that
But
ought to be.
I can very confidently say, maybe I won't be living till then. The changes are coming. Our generation, 10 years, not 10 years, I wouldn't say 10 years.
Yeah, except
20
now,
years
well,
after
you know, it's a
will
different
be
thing.
comfortable.
It's coming to something different.
Food, yes, is the food.
I mean, if
I don't-
the government represents
Nothing-
the wealth of a nation, which is basically also the wealth of the people. So if the government is loaning industry money, the government has a right to take a percentage of the profit and distribute it amongst the people.
Absolutely.
So
It's all just.
even if it's a tiny, tiny percentage,
Figures
but
will be
then
big.
it will add up. It will add
Yeah,
up.
right, it will.
Or else they're gonna lob forward.
And I'm
It's a
looking
more
forward to
direct. It's and people can spend that as they wish. It's a more direct redistribution of money, and it's tied to industrial success. It's very, very interesting. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
And now the youngsters.
Yes, hello. How you doing, Bill?
But most people are not at all aware
I'm
of
okay.
this idea
Yeah.
of redistribution.
Because of the capitalism, United States is having.
Well, you got these extremists, arch capitalists, who scream about everything, who want to control everything and everybody, you know, and they have no concept of what this is all about.
Now what?
Yeah.
Will then
And they bullshit everybody.
discuss them, put the points out.
But just because they're in a position to get money doesn't mean that they shouldn't return a percentage of profit to the person who's lending it to them.
They've got to do it. And it will come.
And I'm not just talking about I mean, if they're getting capital at 1%, I mean, come on. Just to return the capital when they're making astronomical profits, this can all be put into a formula. If you're making 20, 30, 40, 50% profit, then a piece of that has to go back to the people.
Absolutely.
Well,
That's all.
yeah, but they're just.
I'll take a cigarette. You got an
Okay.
extra?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Need to get an extra. Let me get.
But you know what? They don't get it. It hasn't been.
The restroom is the same.
Yeah, they're right around to the left.
I don't know. I just think it's gonna be together though.
Well, it isn't going to be together by then.
No, it's gonna be understood.
Oh.
It's
Well-
gonna take off, it's gonna
Yeah,
make,
yeah.
But they have to explain it
it's gonna
correctly.
make Woodstick look like a cakewalk.
They have to, yeah, they have to explain it correctly. They have to, and you know what, they didn't even explain
And that was
deregulation, the hazard of deregulation correctly. Here's the explanation of deregulation.
No, come over here.
Every game has rules. How can you have a baseball game without rules? It's not baseball.
Look, get on the camera.
How can,
Oh,
every
okay.
game has rules. This is how you explain deregulation. Take away all the rules. The guy who has the money makes all the rules. I have the ball. I own the stadium. If you want to play baseball, you play by my rules. And I can change my rules every day. But that's not baseball. That's bullshit. That's called deregulation. Hockey has rules. No, I own the stadium. I own the hockey sticks. And if you want to play, you play by my rules. But I change the rules every day. That's deregulation. That's bullshit. You can't have a game without rules. Finance is a game. Okay? Everything is a set of interaction. Game set. It's called game theory and sets.
Yeah.
And deregulation is nonsense. It's insanity.
Yeah.
Well, okay, what do you think?
Take all, and it's bullshit.
Well, it's the way it's been all through history. Now, why don't you talk? What do you think, Jimmy? What do you think? Here's Jimmy. Here, do this. Here, Duval, do this. Will you make it?
Slaves, grain.
Harold, is it taping?
Yeah,
It is.
yeah, take it. Get the word Jim down. Get that.
Slaves, grain, and treasure.
Tree's not running.
Those were the three veins of the Roman Empire. We are exactly in the stage now in which ancient Rome was during the time of the latifunding, where a few powerful billionaires controlled entire estates.
That's plutocracy, right?
It was plutocracy. But we are exactly in that stage now. Now people may not like history repeats itself. We don't have slaves anymore. But then we are outsourcing.
Yeah, we kind of do have slaves, though.
Wait,
Yeah. But now, if we have outsourcing, that's an indirect form of slavery, where somebody else is producing the goods for us.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
And a few elite billionaires are controlling that outsourcing.
yeah.
Outsourcing.
Outsourcing
Yeah.
is another issue.
And like
This
this,
is affecting the whole world economy.
15 to 20 big
It's
corporations.
going to happen.
15 of big 20 corporations are controlling the entire production of goods and services. So we have, therefore, the rise of billionaires. And when you talk about a jobless recovery, yeah, if you have a jobless recovery, the recovery can only be for those already controlling what they control.
That's right, right. So that, there has to be a different system incorporated into all of this. Otherwise, it's nonsense.
So when you talk about...
However, there is a lot of industry that still could be created.
Well, you can create work.
You could create into the green industry.
all
Green
that's
power,
being
green power.
created are dot-coms.
Hmm?
Dot-coms are the only thing that's being created even now in Silicon Valley. I mean, I've not heard of a single manufacturing innovation that is being employed in America.
In production, yeah.
Production. I mean, people innovate over here, the buyers are always elsewhere, mainly China and India. So you can create manufacturing efficiencies if nobody over here is benefiting from that. So when you talk of capital diffusion, you are basically talking of the 1930s. Stalin tried it, it was called commune.
Well, they
That
did.
did not work. That
Yeah, but
did not work.
that's a different, that's something else.
They also did away with private property.
Property,
Yeah.
property.
This would be a market-oriented
We're not
approach.
talking about doing away with private ownership, private
Not at all.
enterprise, or private property, if I get you right.
Absolutely,
You know-
that would be, if you have a stake and you're getting money because you have a piece of ownership of the technology,
Yeah.
then you can do what you want.
Yeah,
You
it's-
might want to play a trumpet.
We're just,
You might want to play music.
What we're doing
You
is
might-
really extending ownership
Yes,
to a wider base.
that's right. And you got to
Based
do,
on what the government capitalizes in terms of innovation and industry.
well, I think the main thing they're going to do is set up a system. The major new thing needed is that capital diffusion. They have to have a reinsuring capability. That's what the derivatives and swaps are all about. Currency fluctuations. If you do a contract for $100 million water project or something, you'd better have a derivatives clause, or it's to deal with acts of God, floods, difference, currency. So they're it's derivative of the actual product. It's a thing to bring insurance to the economic order.
I see.
And that's what you need to have a backstop to that with the government in terms of the Federal Reserve. You got to have the money have value, and in the end, whoever's producing what they can produce has to have a market that's able to have the money or the demand to buy what can be produced. A woman in Africa could buy, she has to have $2 to buy penicillin to save her child. She doesn't have $2. You got to get money to the people in order for them to be able to buy what's going to be able to be produced, and it can't be through their labor only. No, that's
Well, I
just
wanted
me.
to get that on, get
No,
you.
that's just me talking. How about you, George? What do you think of all this? George Sotireles, ladies and gentlemen.
My name is
Which
George
one?
Sotireles.
This one?
No, this fellow is George.
Okay.
He's talking now.
Anything else?
Come and sit here, George, because you talk low. So sit right here so that you'll pick it up on the
I'll
camera.
make it very brief.
I
Thank you.
just came from the Greek independence
Oh,
celebration
yeah?
at City Hall
Oh, yeah?
with all those politicians.
Okay, George, what do you think of all this?
I think it's a very interesting evening. It's good that you're all here. I'm going to read more about this. Very impressed by Buckwheat Fuller. I wasn't following the entire presentation, Harold, but there were parts of it I was understanding from other people here. The reference to the 1930s, the reference to, I think it was 1780 manual labor, very interesting. I read a news article recently that said that beginning around the 1840s, 1850s, when the wealth in Europe and North America skyrocketed. Took off.
Yeah, it grew.
Prior
Well-
to 1850. So anyway, thank you, Barbara, for being here. Something about wealth, 1850 on.
But we find the major premise is that this one that never is voiced, that at the level of capability, for the first time in 200,000 years of human evolution and development, cultural and technological development, there are more haves than have-nots at the level of capability. Never was the case before about 1970.
Right. So
That change has occurred on the living side, and it's never mentioned. It can't. It's assumed to be
That
ipso
was
facto
because of
absurd.
public access.
Well, public access was created about then. There was a whole lot of things. Earth Day was created then. The thing that Bobby Dylan was talking about wasn't sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was that transformation being sensed by the creative community, and it's going to come back. It's going to come back.
Harold, there's less poor
Woodstock,
people
man.
now.
Yeah, Woodstock 70, Woodstock, the whole thing, Malcolm X, everything.
Stonewall.
Yeah.
Stonewall was then, yeah, that's
What you're
right.
saying is the less poor people
But those
now.
are all
The
lesser
moonwalk,
things.
the moonwalk.
The main thing is the economics.
Yeah.
That's what's been, there's a new thing
You're saying
able
that-
to
you're saying
be
there's less
brought
poor
into
people-
being.
There's less poor people now than, say, 1940.
No, not in reality necessarily.
No,
but,
capability.
Okay,
no,
good, okay.
but there probably are less even that. But on a percentage term, you make a distinction between the reality and the capability. And there's going to be political, it's going to be increasingly seen that we have a capability that our system isn't allowing us to realize, and there's going to be political flare-up from that that's going to make possible a new system that relates to the future and not anchored in the past.
Is society better off now than, let's say, 1950, 1960?
I would say so. That's my fair. I have a sense that it's growing.
So instead of...
But it's becoming more plutocratic in the ownership.
So what this is going to supplant is the taxation system, which recirculates the money.
Might be.
Which still go on, but industry will look at this as a tax, but it's not a tax.
Well, if you have an
It's a rightful accruing of a percentage of what we as a whole what we as a whole invest in.
well, yes,
Different
that's
activity.
true. Well,
And it shouldn't just benefit a few people.
I was interested, Artistedes, that they talk about the private sector and the public sector, and the whole world in the news is reporting.
It's not communism. I mean, people,
It's not.
everybody will say, "Oh, this is communism," but it's not.
It's not because,
that's not communism.
well, you're going to
It's
be,
not classical communism by any.
No, you're gonna be
It's a different system.
you'll be extending ownership of private property holding to the people as a way of distributing income.
Yeah.
Over capitalism.
Well, if the people invest in something through the government, then the people deserve a return.
Well, yes, but you
So
have,
it's encouraging investment. It's encouraging development, it's encouraging private investors, it's encouraging all kinds of investments.
Right.
I mean, and government itself can go directly into certain projects like the WPA, and that benefited the whole country. But and some people said, "Oh, that's communism," but that's not communism. That's
communism-
development.
But if it is
And it
jobless recovery,
If it is,
it would mean that a person looking to find a job to pay his rent and get his food would have to have a capital diffusion that can only happen in the realm of charity or aid.
right. Or through taxes, you can have, you have the transfer payments and things.
So
And-
that it would be even worse.
And if the capitalists, if that chart is correct, maybe it isn't, but the one that shows that the production is actually increasingly through time up 90% and vanishing point coming for labor, and you only distribute income to 95% of the people through their labor, then you're going to have a problem. And what the capital really earns, or what the capital actually produces, they only get about 1/10. Because it's taken off in taxes for redistribution through government programs and all kinds of other things, and that could be leveled out. That could be leveled out if the people are related to the way things are actually being produced, and then that could free them to be doing what they want to do rather than what a system dictates they must do in order to have bread to eat.
Right.
Because they're projecting the slavery from the past. It's essentially slavery. It's essentially slavery.
But this capital diffusion in the
Yes.
long run would only go from republicanism to imperialism as it did in ancient Rome.
Well, I think not, because it's a different era. This is a different era.
Within the next 20 years, you're going to have a powerful American general. In the
McChrystal?
next 20 years, you're going to have a powerful American general who's going to capitalize on institutions like the Tea Party. And democracy as we know it will still exist. Democracy in Rome lasted for 500 years before it became Rome.
Well, yeah,
For
maybe.
500 years before it
Yeah,
became
but
Rome came
The
into
Tea
place.
Party is not an institution.
No, the Tea Party could be included.
It is
You
comparable to
could
the
co-opt the
It's a
Tea Party.
political maneuver.
Yeah, so are the committees
The Tea Party's
in
a
ancient
joke.
Rome.
This is a joke. It's
Yes,
a
yeah, they're
bunch of
asking questions.
misfits who can't figure out
Well,
what's going on.
it's a lot of misunderstanding. Is what the Tea Party. It's not an institution.
Well, no,
It's a
but
group of misfits.
in
Whatever
view,
they are, if they come into power or if their power rises, it doesn't matter how much of a misfit they are.
well, it would be the Republicans probably they would go for, and the Republicans are more like the establishment, and the system that you're going to introduce has to be able not only to liberate or vision liberate, it's going to take time, liberate the people, everybody, and the ecology, but it's going to have to also include those responsible for the outdated historical institutions, assumptions of human nature and so forth, and that's like what they call the Illuminati, the people who run everything. They're going to have to be included, and this is something that would be able to stay their hand, and also they would be able to understand it in the fullness of time as beneficial to them, but they will be anchoring us to history, and we need something that subsumes history, not overthrows it, and includes everybody. Everybody's included on this. That's the difference. Because you have non-zero sum as possible. It wasn't possible in history. It wasn't possible in Rome. There was scarcity. Scarcity was the reality. We have now got another reality we link to, and they picked up on it in 1968. Bobby Dylan was right. There was something blowing in the wind. We've been 40 years in the wilderness. And it's gonna come, and it's encouraging to read the Wall Street Journal. Read the Wall Street Journal today, it's encouraging, they're moving in the right direction.
The government can do this too. If you have, let's say you have like 100,000 people working for General Motors, the government can say, look, we are giving you X billions of dollars to develop the next hybrid or the next, hyper economy, fuel efficient car. On the what's the word I'm looking for? On the stipulation that you parcel out a percentage of shares to all your workers.
Well, that
so
they
that
could
the
do.
workers all have a piece of the company.
Well, Lewis did that. Lewis did that, and Mortimer Adler. They wrote that book, That's the one that they're going
And
to.
that's been subterfuged
Capitalist
by all this
manifesto.
deregulation, because this was already happening. And then it got subterfuged by all this deregulation and rip-off
Well, that's
mergers and
Friedman.
acquisitions and arbitrations.
Right. Friedman-
Remember when arbitrators were really big and all of that
Friedman
stuff?
emerged out of Bush. Friedman emerged, market fundamentalism, the market is right, and everything, all the derivatives
Which
and
is
everything.
bullshit.
Well, it's,
I mean,
it has a great deal to say for it. The free market and for capital enterprise and entrepreneurial
But I
has a
mean,
great
but
deal
there
to say
still
for
have to
it.
be rules, and at the same time, we can redesign.
Thank you. There's a guy I've got on my website.
Well,
He
we
said,
Redesign capitalism, I
We
like
have to
that
re-
idea.
we have to-
Redesign
we have to redesign the entire financial system and everything else. And it's not a paradigm shift. It's not a little paradigm shift of liberating some group or
not gonna
something.
go without
It's a
kicking and
paradigm
screaming.
well, it's not them. It's not them that are at fault. You didn't expect them. They're an anchor to history. It's not them. It's not gonna. It's the intellectuals
The
like us.
elite is not standing up for a
There is
redesigned
no
capital.
voice. Where is there a voice?
They're not standing up and saying, hey, look,
There's an
we're going to
alternative.
fix the system, change the system. It's not just about
Look, as long as
deregulation.
they keep using fiat money, we have no
This is
economic.
exactly that whole system is to get the money isn't fiat. It's got to be tied to production.
Well, it's gotta
And
be-
it's got to be, but the ownership of the stock tied to things producing
Right.
wealth and value have to be disseminated as a way of distributing income.
Right,
They have to have it. So it's tied to the private
it
sector.
makes sense.
It's tied to the market. It's a market solution that involves the market.
Market solution implies consumers. Consumers implies.
You can't be a
spending power.
consumer. You
Spending
can't.
power implies jobs.
No, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be jobs. There has to be an alternative way.
What is that
Be-
alternative?
Ownership of stock, ownership of private ownership of stock in viable entities producing wealth and value
Yeah, we're
to
not-
the
we're not saying
people,
you
not
can't
to the
own
class,
anything.
not to the ownership class, not to the just to the people. It's when Bush did his tax cut, it went to 1/100 of 1%. The real value of the tax cut went to them.
But who
And-
would give shares and ownership to people without money?
Well, the system would have to be set up to do that. That's what it's all set up to do, because when you've got a system set up, they have ESOPs. There's about 10,000 ESOP companies owned in varying degrees by the workers of the company. That was Luso.
Again, you're talking about workers, so workers means jobs.
Well, I know that, and that's because we're coming out of history. And the only way they could do it, they couldn't get it for the whole economy. It's a whole system thing you need, not just the people within a corporate enclave. You could do it with a corporate. There are some of those, and some of them do well. But what you have to do is, like Barbara said, you have to redesign the whole financial system based upon another system other than that, which is the one they're reifying coming out of history. That's it, and it's coming. Read the Wall Street Journal. Follow Mr. Dodd's committee,
That
and
implies
look.
job creation, I'm telling you. That's the root cause of it all. Because people without money and people who don't have jobs are simply not going to be able to afford ownership, or no one just.
No, they're not going to buy ownership.
Those who have it will not just give it away.
No, they don't get it.
They never did.
No, you're not
It will
understanding.
increase
If the government is putting certain money into various corporations, then at a very low interest, then the government can say, we're going to take a percentage of your profits above a certain point. When you hit a certain point of profitability, we're going to take a percentage of that and distribute it as shares to people who will have to determine what sector gets that.
Distributed as shares.
Like, for instance,
You mean the
coal
welfare
mines.
system?
No,
For instance,
Distributed as shares. Ah.
as shares.
It will improve capital formation capability.
So each man, woman, and child will have a
Should
given
be
number of
very,
shares.
yeah, that little box, I've got a link on my site you can go to that has all these graphs and stuff. And that little thing has constituencies that could be given ownership, like, the people who use electricity are a natural group ownership for Con Ed.
Yeah.
Okay, you finance new capital, and you have to finance it out of its future. The logic of business finance, you make an investment that's going to pay for itself out of its future earnings. Okay, not from past savings. That's one thing they try to sell. So that's the way the rich get
So,
rich.
if the government has already benefited by most of the banks paying off the top loans, and government has benefited in terms of interest payments and stuff like, and warrants and all that.
Uh-huh.
So,
2 years?
government already has some kind of capital diffusion capability right now.
Well, they've
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so how is he going to use that? So, for the average Joe who does not have a job and has to pay a rent, what should he expect?
Well, one thing that you expect is you're going to have an alternative way of him getting income than a transfer thing.
Without
will
so,
continue.
so an average Joe can expect to have money coming in without having to do any real work.
Yes. If you think if that trend is correct,
Well,
and
does
it
the
is,
shareholder,
now,
what
wait a
does the
minute.
shareholder do?
If that trend is correct, then yes, they will have income to come so that they can buy what they want and they can live the life that they want to do as a liberated human being rather than a wage slave. They're all in slavery.
Without having to work for
Without
a living.
having to work. What they will work with is the goods of civilization. Rather than standing on an assembly line or doing the things that the people say they have to do in order to fill some need of the king who owns all the assets to the people, the serfs picking up the leaves or something, they will do what they want to do. And then they will say, what will they want to do?
In the
If
meantime,
you all of a sudden had an income of $40,000 a year, which used to blow your brains out because you don't have the right to go and wash dishes and make money, would you?
no, but in the meantime, those that control the production and the people who work for them will go on getting increasing amounts of money because they are going to pay those who work for them.
Yes,
So you
that's
are going
true.
to create such a horrible class structure.
We've got that now.
Got that now, and if what you are trying to say is gets
Look at
implemented,
it this way. The money that goes to the people comes through, in many cases, from the tax structure, where government then uses that money to do things for people, right?
infrastructure
Okay,
development.
but at the same time, another revenue stream can come out of that, out of the money that the government lends to develop other industries. A revenue stream can come out of that directly to people as shareholders. So we're not only citizens, but we're citizen shareholders.
So I live in an apartment, I have a job and I can afford my rent. The guy next door is out of a job, he cannot afford the rent and he's about to be evicted. So both of us as citizens will have shares in the capital diffusion scheme.
Well,
Only that I'll go on getting richer. I'll have the job, I have my income,
beautiful.
plus the shares. The guy next door probably will not be evicted because he will have income, but he will never have the same income and the same standard of living which I have now because mine is now double. The one that I'm making on my own plus capital diffusion
Yeah, but
program.
the more you diffuse capital, the more people will benefit and the more people will create their own industry and do things that are better for their lives. In other words, capital diffusion is something that can happen without taking away ownership of things from people.
True, but in the end, it involves giving something for nothing.
Not really. If you're a member of a nation, that's your first qualification. And so you're part of that ecosystem. Like if you're, for instance, it could be done state by state to make it more easy to understand. Let's say you're in Virginia or West Virginia where there's all that coal mining. Well, that's destroying the ecosystem and it's just destroying the lives of a lot of people. But what if all those people, if the government decided to help the coal industry, which the government helps every industry, as far as I know. There isn't an industry that the government hasn't helped. Right now they're saying $9 billion for a nuclear reactor. Well, everybody who's in the vicinity of that reactor should have a percentage of the profit of that reactor. What's wrong with that? They're suffering the effects of that reactor, aren't they?
Now, when everybody has money, aren't you worried about inflation?
I don't know.
See,
Well,
that's the key thing. That's what Maynard Keynes was talking about originally. Inflation is too much money chasing too few goods.
So make more goods.
too few goods?
Make
That-
more
that's-
goods.
Everybody's making goods now.
Everybody's making goods.
Yes.
But who has a part in making the goods? And that's what matters. Who has a part in making those goods? Those people
No,
who have
but look, when you're talking about investment capital, the banks invest money in capitalistic projects, correct? The Federal Reserve and the government often, well, the Federal Reserve and the government basically gives money to the banks at a particular interest rate to keep that process going. Who is that? That is a product of the government. If there was no government, there'd be no Federal Reserve. Okay? There would be no lending to the banks. This system would not exist. We would be living in a feudal economy. So, we created this system. We are the owners of this system. We are, as citizens, we are part of this system. And we can stop it, or we can use it more to our benefit. Right now, it's not going to our benefit as much as it could be. It's only going to the benefit of a select group of individuals. And you even notice how corporations are run when even the shareholders have no voice.
It is true.
So that's ridiculous. That has to be checked. Capitalism has to be redesigned.
That is a question of important reform, no doubt about it.
That's ridiculous.
So
Reform
can mitigate.
All I'm saying, look at
economic
Greenspan.
disparity.
For years he was reducing the interest rate to industry. He was empowering industry. Big industry was being empowered by the banks vis-a-vis the governments, lowering the interest rate. Well, if the government is going to lower the price of money to industry, then the government also can say, look, when your profit exceeds on the line, when your profit exceeds this point, not only your shareholders and your owners are going to make this money, but the government's going to redistribute that percentage of the money to a group of citizens. Now, how we make that equation as to what group of citizens, as I said, it could be done state by state. It could be done community by community. If somebody has a power plant in one area, and they're using the power from that, they are paying into that system. And the government is paying into that system to make that power plant more efficient.
What about arid areas? What about people living in isolated communities, in deserts, where they cannot tap into any such thing?
This can still be formulated. They can still take a percentage off the top of all of this for those who aren't directly connected to any of it.
So in that case, when everybody has money to pay the rent, those who own the apartment buildings will know that they're going to raise the rent. So the only way to make sure that the people still stay in them is through rent control.
It has been.
So right now there
No,
is
well,
rent
they're destroying
control.
rent control. They're trying to destroy it.
You have to get a system of distributing income to people apart from what they do.
You're
You,
right.
you distribute income to them, and that is a way of hoisting the system on its own petard. Because they're going to, if they have people, if it becomes really massive unemployment and you've got no money, people cannot clear the market. They need to have the people as consumers of what can be produced. And the people would then have access to what they want without having to.
Those who work for a living are never going to stand up to that.
No, they're just going to be better off. They'll be that much better off.
Well,
They'll be definitely much more better, or they would insist on being much more better off than those people who would be getting shares for nothing. And
Yeah,
that is going to create such class divisions.
wait a minute. The quality of life will improve tremendously. People won't be stealing from each other or robbing from each other. People won't be going through all these extremes.
There is already a welfare system in place, and that has not solved anything.
Well, is the premise, a minor premise, that there's going to be a displacement of labor in the productive process vis-a-vis capital instruments? The capital instruments are responsible increasingly for production, both intellectual and physical. So you're going to have a displacement. Mr. Keynes said, maybe he's wrong. Maybe we'll find a job for everybody, you know, on the Lord's estate. It'll, you know, but if they're going to have that, then you're going to undercut the market, the demand side of the supply-demand. We got a tremendous capability of providing for everybody, particularly with good design and with ephemeralization, doing more with less. 175,000 tons of copper cable to get to London from New York was replaced by a 100-pound transponder on a satellite.
Rome required tributes of grain.
Yeah, of course
There would be ships lining up in the Roman harbor, and people would just go up there. They would get free grain and free wine.
Uh-huh.
They would not be working because they had all been replaced by the latifundis. They would all
what?
No, the latifundis. The latifundia.
Latifundis, all huge estates owned by billionaires.
Yeah, right.
And they would import slave labor. Slave labor they don't have to pay. And they would buy up all the small farmers, and then they would vacate the land.
That's part.
And they would congregate in the cities.
With
and
all
in the cities, with tributes of grain and treasure, they would get free grain and free wine.
But with all due
And
respect,
that led to imperialism.
well, that led. You had a 1,000-year period of feudalism, where everything was done on a feudal estate. The serfs were owned by the feudal lord, and they all had legion to it.
It's very important.
That's part of what James Joyce correctly called the nightmare that is history. There's been no liberation of the people ever, anywhere. It's getting there. We're on the verge now. We're either going to have to liberate humanity within an ecological context, which is within our grasp at a level of design and so forth, for the first time, and then we're going to have to do it in a way that's going to include those responsible for all of the outdated institutions we've inherited out of history. They're all out of date. Education, notions of human nature, everything is out of date with what the future requires, and we need to make that transition. And it's not the work of the politicians reifying or reestablishing the validity of the outdated institutions in their various forms, making little quantitative changes. It's a paradigm of paradigms and paradigms shift that we're coming up to.
That can only be achieved by regulation.
Pardon?
That can only be achieved by regulation.
It's
Regulation of a massive kind.
No, the massive change you're talking about is being discussed in Washington this week.
But it's also conceptual. Every worker should own a small share in what they're doing.
Again, worker. The key point is worker.
No,
that's a
Every
word.
worker
yeah,
means those who work.
but also every citizen.
That's different. That's getting to be a
But
generalized thing.
You're still, look, this doesn't mean everybody will have equal amounts.
No.
They can never have equal amounts.
This just means that a lot more people
Will have
will have an opportunity.
And also, realize the biggest, help yourself. Here, help yourself.
No, I need to
Oh, sure. Here, help you. Take the ashtray. If you think 100 years out, the major thing that motivates human notions of social organization and so forth has to do with what do you do? How do you make money?
Yeah.
And that is going to be obviated. we're going to get to the point where people are not interested in that. And that's the major thing by which people get a sense of identity, by the success they realize, and they can be done. And when you mess with, or threaten to mess with people's sense of identity, you've got real trouble. Because that's what makes revolutions. And that's what makes very, very upset. And so what we're doing is, you're going to have a vision of a liberated planet. People will be able to have access. They're going to have technologically productive systems that are going to be incredibly productive. And there is, again, major premise, there is enough. When you get to enough, then you've got a different kind of context in which all your social organizations, notions of human nature, they say human nature, what it'll always fall on is that you can't have any idealized system where you're going to have a liberated, libertarian, everybody can be free to do what they want to do. They might want to, some guy says, go over there and stand 8 hours. Yeah, I'd rather not. I'd rather go play jazz with my friend down in the corner. Mm-hmm. And he's got enough security by what his economic status, he can do what he wants to do. Educationally, everything. It's like liberation. And we've never had it on the mass scale. The very super rich are able to do what they want and have access.
The super rich, even the middle class.
Even a lot of the middle class can.
Those who work will get income from work. Plus, they would also.
I think you're right. That'll have to hold for a while. That'll have to hold for a while because it's so.
So those who have money will go on having more money.
Yeah, but that will hold for a while because we're so ingrained. We got 200,000 years of living that way, and so and that's where we get identity, and that's important. But then when it gets to be where it's a whole different way that is inherent in the zeitgeist at this moment in history that we happen to be privileged to be alive.
And in continents like Africa, where corruption is so rampant.
Of course it is. You can
and you have despots.
Of course.
People.
Well, I think you got.
Do you think they will ever stand up for capital diffusion? Do you think they will ever stand up for capital diffusion?
They will because there's going. No. They will stand up, and what you have to do, they're not going to stand up for capital diffusion if you're going to roll out the guillotines or something like that with the massive discontent and that. That no. But what they're going to do, they're going to have to be something they can understand in a way, right, where it's hard for them. They're, after all, in the mind of greed and fear and all that and everything. But, there's going to have to be a way where they'll be able to understand what's going on and go along with it. But they will be not full-sworded support. They will be the last to cotton on, but they're going to anchor us to history. And we need to subsume history, not overthrow it.
So that would be a paradigm, the paradigm shift, that's what you're going
of everything, about. Everything. Institutions, all institutions, the idea of a liberated individual.
And not necessarily in developed countries or developing countries.
Not the whole world.
The whole world.
Within an ecological context. And when you get everybody able to do what it is they fully want to, and you have an educational context, you have everything would be transformed, and you would have a liberated order, and it's going to take a long time. And I'm just encouraged that it looks like we've got a chance that they're moving in the right direction now without knowing it. But you have to talk to them, you have to be able to talk to them, and then have them see a system. I think those two baggers could very easily be incorporated in a movement. And what you have to have is some sort of an understanding outside of the normal news that's reported. It's all reifying the outdated institutions. And who's up and who's down and all that. It's the intellectuals. There are no big thinkers. There's no big thinkers anywhere. That I can see that are talking about things at that level.
Those that are intellectuals are out for themselves, primarily.
Well, they're mostly bought. I just had talk with Susan
Missouri.
Well, yeah, and they're bought. And then the peer review systems that are set up are all financed by the guys with the money.
Those Wall Street analysts that were hawking Enron stocks just a few days before its collapse.
Yeah, it's not, it's even worse than that in a way.
Oh
Lynn Margaret, who's the mother of Dorian Sagan I've been in touch with, she's saying that there is a lack of faith in the scientific process emerging because it's so politicized. is also politicized in the camps within the old paradigm. And there's nobody talking in a comprehensive way, including it all. Fuller tried, and there were some others. Isaac Asimov, there were a few people who tried, but we don't have their likes. We don't have their likes now. And that's the
We don't
plea.
have Fuller, we don't have Kelso, we don't have...
Goodbye, Aristides. Great to see you, Mother.
Thank you very much.
Listen, I want you to really have a good time, Aristides. And I want you to push the envelope, and I want you to really get out beyond the creative age on that way to the future. But I want you to promise you one thing, young man. That you try to stay out of jail, the bail fund will be running low. I'm trying to make it joke. I'm trying to make it. That's great. That's like a react. That's like another.
Yeah.
On that note, we leave. Good night.
Yeah, but something has to give. Something that-
Thanks, man. Well, good to see you tonight. Now, what we ought to hear from, we've heard from everybody, except Rosalee. Now, what do you think of all this nonsense, Rosalee? She's the one who's been bringing the stream to you. Pull your chair over this way a little bit. You've a better light.
The stream's turned off now.
No, okay, but this is being recorded. So what do you think of all this nonsense, Rosalee?
I think that if we had free energy, then we could have a minimum wage for everybody coming from the bounty of the universe itself.
Yeah, that's like Tesla, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people would rather have their dualisms and their dichotomies, and the idea that there is a force greater than us that could truly provide heat and light and run our cars and make our lives better. They'd rather suffer and struggle with oil and the various slave making forms of energy that we currently have at our disposal. And hail Eris, hail. No,
Hail
I
Eris,
can't
hail. That's
change
the
any of it myself.
that's the Eris. Eris is the goddess of chaos, right?
Yeah.
Or of,
she sticks
fractal.
up for the great neutral force, which is there despite the fact that we can't measure it with instruments. The instruments are made out of it. And we can't find God because God is all we see.
Mm-hmm. God is all we see?
Yeah, it's our existence here, everything we see, hear, touch, feel, and do is an artifact of the great neutral force. It is, we're, I don't know, the leftovers or the byproducts or the, you know, what's left after the action has happened.
Yeah, I use the term reified because that's reestablishing or relating. There's a great line I like to say, we drive fiercely into the future with our eye fixed firmly on the rear view mirror.
Oh, thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I don't see any way other than we'll probably be blown off this planet.
I hope that we don't. Do you think there's any purpose to evolution in the universe?
Well, except that I don't believe in evolution.
You don't believe in evolution? I don't understand. What's that mean?
I believe in creation as opposed. I do not think that bacteria, well, maybe bacteria are smarter than people, but the idea that a fish could redesign itself to live without water anymore seems really foolish to me.
Well, it took millions of years for the evolutionary
Yeah,
process.
to happen accidentally, I don't believe in such happy accidents.
That's interesting. Well, okay, I don't understand that. Bucky Fuller I used to like. I don't know if you got into him much or anything, but he used to cast about, as he would say. He was a great polymath. He would cast about for some purpose in the universe, and he said the second law of thermodynamics, and thermodynamics seem to have a great deal to do with the way the universe, isn't it amazing? The sun is such high temperatures and deep space has such low temperatures, and this little third planet has stayed within a range between 212 and 32 degrees for billions of years.
Yeah.
Amazing. How the hell anything ever happened? It took billions of years to just get up. It had to be the bacteria. It was 90%, 80% of the
That's why I believe in creation.
creation by
By
the great neutral
the
force.
great neutral force.
Is the great neutral force a name for God?
I think so.
Uh-huh. Hail Goddess,
Well,
Eris.
sort of. Yeah, but she's imaginary. She's proudly imaginary.
Yeah.
She has imaginary tattooed on her
Yeah.
chest.
Uh-huh.
Just to make sure that you can remember. And she's a slut.
Uh-huh.
She loves everybody equally.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's
Talking
interesting.
about Paris Hilton?
No, we're talking about Eris, the goddess of chaos. But he used to say, but the second law of thermodynamics, see, all systems move toward chaos or entropy. And they all move to disarray and toward entropy. And he said he was casting about, and he said he thought that the biological process was an anti-entropic force in the universe that moved across entropy and brought increased conscious pattern understanding to the process of which we are a part.
Well,
That
yeah.
doesn't have any...
Look at fractals.
Fractals, yeah,
have
right.
A constant growth pattern.
Yeah.
Mandelbrot.
Mendelbrot, yeah. I think I met him, Mendelbrot, but I'm
Oh, you
not
met
sure.
Mandelbrot?
Yeah, I
Oh.
think I did. He was out in IBM. He was at IBM.
Okay, I'm done now. So
You're done. So
turn that
thanks for
off.
putting up the stream and doing it. This is Rosalee Grable, our helping beyond all possibility. We are trying to put together this thing, and so I guess we're about done, huh, Jimmy? Have we said enough and everything? And
Yeah.
well, now that we've solved all the problems of the world,
Yeah,
or
now that
hardly.
we solved all the problems.
But keep
in the world.
reading the Wall Street Journal. They're moving in the right direction. But I think, anyway.
Yeah, and suddenly they're appearing in our local bodega.
Okay. Thanks, Rosalie, for putting this together and for streaming for whoever was out there. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much. That's it for now. And we're going to stop this now. And good night to all.